Well, what's happening, everybody? Going a little bit early this evening. Let me get this thing plugged in here. All right. Get some refreshment. Get a little something to drink so we can chat about Mopars. So what's happening, everybody? If everybody's having a fantastic whatever day you're watching this. So here's the thing. I get more questions about naturally aspirated Mopars really than anything else. I get some more, at least of late, questions about the supercharged applications, but primarily most of the questions have something to do with a 5.7 or a Scat Pack variant. Every once in a while, somebody will pop in with a question about a truck, but for the most part, it's all about the NA cars. And so what I wanted to do is focus specifically on the naturally aspirated crowd, answer some questions if you guys have any. Most of the time it's what exhaust, what cam, what heads, what intake, all of that kind of good stuff. That's typically what most guys are looking at when you're talking about modifications for your naturally aspirated Mopar. But with that, I do have to caution, and I got to jump out in front of a couple of issues that can always pop up when we're talking about NA stuff. And so let a few more of you guys get in, check in with you early birds real quickly, and then we'll get into this. If you've got some questions, be thinking about what you would like me to cover. And it could be anything. We could be talking about tuning. We could be talking about, again, hard parts, cams, heads, springs, push rods, exhaust, gears, all the different things that can come into play when you want to get more power out of your car or truck. And just to let you guys know, my DT Ram tune is pretty much wrapped up. So that thing is running really good. But anyway, let me check in with you guys real quickly, and then we'll get going with there. Speed Maniac's in first. Oh, what's up, man? Frederick's got the cadence right off the bat. What's up, buddy? I like it. With the flex and the bald dude with the glasses, or shades normally, but glasses of late. Eric saying, good evening. Dan saying, what's up, Professor B? What's up, man? Rum's asking, hey, B, you ever seen the PO420 low catalyst efficiency code on a Mopar? It's been a while since I've seen one, normally because we tune all of that stuff. Typically because that's part of a tune you're going to account for. I got an 05 Magnum RT and it pops up every now and again. Probably the cats, the coating on the substrate may be pretty much cooked at that point. So it might be time for a new exhaust. It would just depend on how often you're getting that code and how regularly you're seeing that thing pop up. Could be bad rear O2s. I like to try to err on the side of make it go faster. Ontario's checking in with David. What's up, my man? Tad saying nitrous friendly in a sense. Yes. Technically it's NA, right? Nitrous assisted. Smoking at 5 saying, how to be finally catch another live chat. Sovereign is in. Sovereign's got the cadence down too. Mod on the job. So let's get into the naturally aspirated chat and go from there. So one of the things that a lot of guys will ask right off the bat is, well, should I go with long tube exhaust of any kind? What is it? What does it help? What does it do? For you guys with 5.7s, long tubes are going to help you more than with one of the 6.4s. And the reason for that is the 5.7 has a tighter lobe separation angle. It promotes or helps to promote scavenging when you have long tube headers. The wider that lobe separation is, the less time you have for actual scavenging. You just don't have as much overlap, and you need overlap for scavenging, which helps to get those exhaust gases out of the cylinder and draw that intake air charge through. So if you got a 392, you'll pick up a little bit of bottom end torque. What I like about long tubes for 392, guys, I'll get to you 5.7 folks here in just a second, but what I like about the long tubes for the 392s is that you pick up some partial throttle drivability with the 392. It just You've got more time because the engine's turning slower. You've got a little bit more actual time for some scavenging to take place. So you'll see some torque picked up down low, maybe up to 2,500 RPM. After that, there's really not a difference. Matter of fact, you may see the long tube headers drop, like from your point of view, drop off a little bit more quickly at the big end of the, in other words, at the far right-hand side of that dyno chart. The reason for that is those long tubes then become a restriction when they're not performing an actual task. They need to be scavenging or else they're actually going to cost you power, believe it or not. Let's see, Sovereign's saying NA all the way, 392 Voodoo. Yeah, 392 is a great engine. It really is. X is asking a quick question about weight reduction. We can talk about that too. What's the weight savings with the rear seat delete? 45 pounds. And do you notice any handling difference removing that weight from the rear of the car? No. You'll notice a couple of things though. You gain about that much trunk space just because that rear seat delete pushes out a little bit. You will notice the car is a little bit louder inside. You'll pick up a little bit of road noise, so you'll pick up on that. And what else? Oh, well, it's this. The only other thing about the rear seat delete, other than the fact I like the way that it looks, that I like is that, well, for one, nobody can bug you about giving you a ride, bumming a ride from you. But the thing is that with the rear seat delete, you can't fold the seats down anyway when you have the rear seat back there. So if you need the extra room, you kind of can't use it. You could, I guess, push the passenger seat all the way forward and drop the passenger side down. But that's really the only way you can utilize that folding rear seat. So there's that. Another thing is you got to remember with the rear seat delete, and it can either be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you're looking at this, but you lose interior crawl space to your trunk. You lose access to your trunk. And the problem with the trunks and the Challengers is that you don't have a key. So that can be a little bit of an issue if your battery dies. You just have to start disassembling things. It doesn't make it as easy. But anyway, 45 pounds. And do you notice a difference? Not really. Not on a car that weighs 4,400 pounds. But there are some other things that you pick up on. Oh, Sovereign saying you saw the Durango with the 345 badges. Cool. Not the Hemi badges. HU's talking about the 5.7. Yeah, well, so let's talk about the 5.7. So y'all know where I stand with the 392 and long tubes. It's a it's a subtle improvement on a 392, but it's not going to get you real performance gains. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. The 5.7 is a different story, though. The 5.7's got log exhaust manifolds, and that alone will, I mean, with the fact with you got a cam that's got a tighter LSA, it comes from the factory with bad manifolds anyway. At least in terms of performance, that's where you'll see some performance gain is with the long tubes in the 5.7. Just remember though, you have to have a tune to run long tube exhaust. And so, guys will say, well, what about a tune? Should I get the car tuned? Yes. If you're going to want to do anything to the car ever later on, you're going to have a tune because you've got to be able to manipulate knock sensor voltage. You've got to be able to manipulate fueling. You've got to be able to manipulate timing. All of those are important for long tubes, but the very first one's the most. That's knock sensor voltage. Long tube headers are going to be noisy. It's not just the noise coming out of the car. We're not really talking about that. There's just more noise there because you have exposed pipes with a lot of loud going through them. That loud comes out of those pipes and it can piss off or freak out your knock sensors. And these cars are already bad enough as it is with a bunch of false knock. Well, add long tubes or even short tube headers to that mix and you basically just exacerbate the entire situation with that thing. So you're going to need a tune anyway. So get you a tuner that speaks fluent Mopar. And then from there, exhaust, if you've got a 5.7 would be my first place to start. Because no matter what you do to that car later on, that exhaust is going to help you. Next is going to be, we can talk about intake manifolds. We can talk about cylinder heads. Camshafts, though, always seem to be brought up at about this time too. So let's kind of jump in the middle of that. So if you've got a 392, what camshafts work? Well, here's the problem. They all work. Just to what degree are you willing to let go of some of that sweet, sweet, snappy tip-in throttle response? The thing with the 392, the calling card of the 392 is it has got real snappy tip-in torque from basically right off idle until, well, you're done playing with it. Really, it's just a very snappy, torquey engine. A lot of that has to do with the intake manifold that it has. The camshaft, well, it's really got more of like a positive displacement supercharger camshaft in the thing. Believe it or not, the camshaft in the 392 and the one in the Hellcat are almost the same camshaft. Yeah, the Hellcat's got more exhaust duration, but functionally, they're basically the same, okay? So, but what makes that car really good is displacement and the intake manifold that it has, and the fact that it's got a cam that's got extremely active intake runners. That makes it snappy from a partial throttle point of view. Now, if you want to make the car faster, stick with a smaller camshaft, something, again, you guys have heard me say this over and over and over again, but the 392 loves camshaft profiles that are in the 220 intake, 230 exhaust range. Find you something in that range and it is going to work really well with that car. It's going to basically make the car act and think like it's got another 30 or 35 cubic inches. It'll make it act like a 426 because it's going to pick up power everywhere, including off throttle. You're not going to need a torque converter for it. It's an extremely good street cam. It won't have a lope to it. You may not even notice it's got a cam in it at startup. You might get a little bit of lope, but for the most part, it's not going to chop at all. It's just going to seem like a very good OE 426 has been transplanted under the hood of your car, which is to say you'll pick up 30 to 40 horsepower-ish to the rear wheels and about the same in torque. You're going to need long tube headers to go along with that anyway to get the most out of it. So again, the headers are going to more or less be a prerequisite at that point. And that's just the way that typically shakes loose. You're not going to be able to get around the need to have a better exhaust at that point once you're playing with a camshaft. Now then, for the 5.7 crowd, man, there's no real polite way to put this. 5.7 is kind of go big or go home range for me. I don't see any reason to go with a small cam with a 5.7. But let me rephrase that a little bit. Go with the same cam with a 5.7, that 220, 230, 220, 228 range cam works really well with the 5.7s, although it can be a little bit choppy. Cams in the 218 to 228 range, 218, 226 do well, but you're going to need a tighter lobe separation angle to really get the most out of those cams. So cams that look like a more traditional cam do better with the 5.7 cars, primarily because it's more of a traditional intake manifold. It doesn't have the variable runner the way that the 6.4 does. So it's going to respond to and will be more fun with tighter lobe separation cams. So I would say for a 5.7, if you wanted to go with like a 218, 228 or 218, 226, with like 112 degree lobe separation angle, maybe even a 110. If you can find a tuner that can tune around that, it's going to be a little bit radical though for a stock torque converter. But a 112 or a 113, I think you can get away with just fine. There's plenty of guys that have. Solid power gain. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with that car. Sound really good too. And you're going to pick up a chunk of mid-range with that cam. So definitely something to take a look at. Lift, it doesn't really matter. It's all going to fall in that 580, 590 range anyway, so I wouldn't worry so much about that. So there's that. I mean, those are going to be some good profiles, kind of some loose guidelines to go with some of the NA stuff. Again, yes, long tubes. Go ahead and go with the 1 7/8 inch. They're not going to hurt anything. And again, it's just a good package all the way around. So from there, where do you go? I mean, you don't really need to worry about transmissions too much. The HP70 will handle pretty much anything you throw at them as far as an NA power output level. There's no reason to go crazy with a rebuild on something that's already going to be kind of under stressed anyway from what you're going to be throwing at it. And that's, doubly as well for the 5.7 guys. So let me check in with you guys real quick. Let's see. Yep, touched on the exhaust from HU. What's up, Professor in chat coming from X? X saying, also, anyone with a 6.1, happy to share my mods that got me to 470 wheel. 6.1s are a lot of fun, man. I'm still... Dang, man, I'm just real partial to the 6.1 combinations. I've always really liked the 6.1. Just it's the prettiest of the group. Number one, when you pop the hood, it's just got a nice chunky mid-range, more of a traditional power output. You don't have to stretch the thing to 6,800 RPM to make power. And man, they're just they're sweet as a nut when you pair it with the NAG 1 5-speed, especially if you're in a swap situation. If I were doing a swap, that would be sweet. X hanging out with Sovereign Rum saying, we're the 392 stage kit. That you're not going to see one, Rum. The reason why you're not going to is they won't pass emissions. One of the issues that you run into with these cars, and this is coming from somebody that spent an obnoxious amount of time with 392s on dynos, is that there's just not a lot of power with the stock camshaft or with long tube headers that you're going to find when you're starting to play with the calibration. I've had 392s on the dyno and have done power sweeps, both with 93 octane and E85, to the point where I was sick of it. Quick Brick's car was kind of our test bed for a lot of this E85 stuff. At least it was for me. And that car just had lap after lap after lap on it. And I will tell you this, there's just not enough meat left on the bone, mainly with intake manifold geometry, especially with the snout on the 392. It's one of the reasons why I've ported so many intake manifolds. Got some decent results out of some of them, but there's just so many horsepowers that you can eke out of something that is limited by the camshaft that's in it. It's got, like I say, it's got such a wide lobe separation angle on that cam. Even with variable cam geometry, there's only so much you can do with a camshaft with an LSA that wide. So with a different cam, it's a completely different story. And you can accidentally get 500 horsepower to the rear wheels out of one of these cars, even with a small camshaft. But believe me, the stage kits won't work. And the reason why I'm telling you that it wouldn't pass emissions, or that they were having a real hard time getting past emissions, is catalytic converter over temp protection, COT. And what you run into that, or what you're running into with that, is that you've got catalytic converters, which are only safe up to a certain temperature, after which they start to degrade somewhat. And what the issue is that to get any more power out of the car, one of the things you do kind of have to adjust is when catalytic converter over temp kicks in. The latest operating systems are kicking the COT in earlier. It's earlier by about 50 degrees. And you don't think it sounds like a lot, but the thing is if in the operating system, keep in mind, the catalytic converter temperature is derived. There's not like a little boop sticking in there to figure out what the temperature is. It doesn't work like that. It's derived number. And if the computer thinks that the catalytic converter is heating up at a rate that it will reach or exceed a certain number, it will start to throw fuel at it like you would not believe. And as you may imagine, and I may have made mention about this before, the catalytic converter over temp protection will enrichen the mixture to into the 9-to-1 range. 9.9, 8, and 7 are all numbers that I've seen when cat over temp protection comes into play. And there's things that can happen that can get the car to that point relatively quickly. It happens like that with Hellcats. So it takes a little bit longer with the NA stuff, but when you load test them, you can get them to that number, and you're just really not going to get a whole lot of power out of them. In fact, I always keep these dyno charts around. This is just old stuff from kind of back in the day when we were doing all of that testing. And I mean, there was so much testing that was going on, but this is more or less, this is my car stock versus my car with the tune. And this is what the gains were. Is that coming up? This thing is so old. Anyway, lots of power across the board. But this is with my car. Let's see, on the dyno stock, it put down 410 horsepower, 400 foot-pounds of torque, and ended up, after a lot of tuning, 428 horsepower, so 18 horsepower, 423 pound-feet of torque, so exactly 23 pound-feet of torque. And there are some liberties that are taken with some torque management and some other things that are in that tune that are going to not necessarily be allowed on an OE tune, one with an executive order. In other words, a carb compliant, if you will, even though that would still pass emissions. There's still some things that were done to that car that you would have to deal with if you were trying to get one carb compliant. So again, you're looking at maybe splitting that gain in half. So 9 horsepower, maybe 10 or 12 foot-pounds of torque for a stage kit. Now, are you willing to spend like good paper money to get that kind of number out of your car? I doubt it seriously. By the way, those numbers were after a significant amount of work. Smoking at 5's asking, how big would I go cubic inch wise on a Gen 3 Hemi? Is 440 about it? It'd be cool to go 512 or even 570. Well, yeah, you got to remember you're still dealing with a small block. I know it's 392 cubic inches, but it's still a 409. Was it 409 bore, 372 stroke? You're still dealing with, in essence, a small block in terms of dimensions. But 440 is actually, if it depends. It really does depend. So if I'm putting a street combination together, a cleanup rebuild with an over bore, over stroke, somewhere between 411 and 426 is a good place to start. I know that a lot of guys like to opt for the 440. I don't really see anything wrong with that. Anything much bigger than that, I think you're going to have a longevity issue potentially biting you. But if you're planning on building a race engine, no replacement for displacement. I'd go 454 or at least 432 if I'm building a naturally aspirated combination. 426 would be fine. They're all good though. It just depends at that point on how nasty you want to get. And with that, we can talk about compression ratios and stuff like that. For the street, for the Gen 3s, if you're building an engine from scratch, 11.5 to 12.5 to 1 would be the max. Factory compression is just shy of 11 to 1 on the 392, which is fine. And that'll get you plenty for the street. You're really only looking about 3% per point. That number can look big, but when, in other words, let's say you're making 400 horsepower to the rear wheels, another point gets you, or another 3 points, 3% would be another 12 horsepower just for a compression point. But with that, every point that you put in play is going to reduce your knock threshold. So for me, if I'm putting together a car that's going to be 93 octane, I'm perfectly fine with 11 to 1. Just leave it at 11 to 1 and you'll be fine. Tune it appropriately on the right gasoline, which is 91 or 93 octane, and you'll typically be good. Now, if you've got the itch to really go big and you want to go with like an E85 combination, realistically, guys, a low compression E85 car is going to be 12.5 to 1. So you can make 12.5 to 1 work with gasoline. Probably not my first choice, though, of fuels to go with that combination. But if you're planning on building an E85 combo, that's like the low end of the spectrum. Most E85 guys you know, your minimum is 13 and a half realistically, and you're probably going to be hovering around 14.5 or higher for an E85 only in a combination. Now, that being said, you've gone way past using the stock intake manifold. You're going to be using one of the Holley variants. At that stage of the game, I wouldn't even think that the Edelbrock intake would be part of what you would be putting together for your car. It would be one of the mid-ram or a high-ram style Holley, and basically be building what in essence would be a Mopar LS at that point. So the same things that would work for an LS work for the Hemi at that point. Big cam, and you would probably want to, you know, you'd be upgrading basically everything at that point, obviously, because your rotating assembly, all of that would be different. So, but for me, again, if it's a street motor, 426 sounds good, just in terms of, you know, being able to say you got a 426, mix in the Edelbrock intake and maybe have it extrude honed, and you'll be sitting really pretty. Most of those combinations are going to put on a Mustang dyno down around 450 horsepower to the rear wheels, maybe a little bit more depending on how racy you want to get with a cam. And that's more than enough to keep you very entertained. I mean, to give you an idea, that's, you know, 450 on a, oh wait, I'm sorry. Really more like 470 on the Mustang dyno now that I'm thinking about it. And that's going to put you really more like the 525, 530 to the rear wheels on a Mustang or on a Dyno Jet. And that's for a relatively mild 426. And you can make that work, obviously, with really any combination of manual or automatic transmission setup. So let me get back to you fellas. Let's see. Oh, sorry, we're taking it with X. Oh, X, yeah, when you get to the track, yeah, pulling weight, that's not a big deal. But yeah, make sure that you never, ever, 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 ever let your car get to a quarter of a tank. When that needle hits the quarter of a tank, the line on the quarter of a tank, all that means is it's time for you to put gas in it. You can run at that point a few gallons in the tank. That'll usually get you quite a few passes, but don't let it get too low. You'll end up, you know, you slosh all the fuel back, you can yip, and that's not a good thing. So do that for sure. Sovereign's asking, how many horsepower would long tubes add to a 392? Is it possible to make 500 without boost or heavy mods? So that's two different questions. Long tubes don't add any horsepower to a 392. It's the tune that ends up making horsepower on a 392. That chart that I was showing earlier is with stock exhaust. What you have to remember is that if you're talking about a 392 and making 500 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Dyno Jet, that's a cam, that's long tubes, but the main thing is obviously a tune. You know, it's going to have to, you know, be tuned anyway to do anything else to the car. So that's where you're going to find yourself. Realistically, you're going to find yourself at, you know, tuned long tubes. If you want to make 500, you're going to need to throw a cam in the thing too. And a fairly decent cam too. I mean, you're talking more than just your normal 220, 230 to really solidly hit that, that number. Usually a little bit tighter LSA too. What would it take to make 500 even? Small cam, long tube headers, Hellcat in, this is on a Challenger, Hellcat intake, Hellcat air filter or no air filter, and an E85 tune. And that combination makes almost exactly 500 to the number. Tad saying headers off at 392, put on a 5.7. Absolutely, you can do that. But again, you will want to adjust knock sensor sensitivity. Speed Maniac's liking a double X on the 392. Very cool. I haven't messed with one of those, but I have been thinking about putting a different cat back on my car, just going with a more conventional muffler and an H-pipe. We'll see though. Robert's asking, what about the 390 rear gear on a 5.7? They get real spunky, but you will need in the tune to make some adjustments to some of the parameters in the transmission and on the engine side so that it doesn't yip a shift. In other words, it doesn't accidentally, or not accidentally, it doesn't, because of predictive shift algorithm, make the car shift early. So you'll want to make some changes there. It is peppy as hell though. And the only downside to it is that it gets a little bit buzzy on the freeway. If you do a lot of highway driving, I would probably suggest, if you want to do a re-gear, go with the 370 as opposed to the 390 gear. Some are saying push rod push-ups for sure. HU378, 392 is very well optimized on factory. Blueprint the intake manifold, Hellcat air box, import the throttle body. If you know someone who can do transmission tuning, yes. Yeah, you would definitely want to get into the tuning aspect of it. When it comes to the intake manifold, you know, there's some people that will say that porting the intake manifold doesn't do a lot. I would say it does plenty. Just know that if you're looking to port the intake manifold, it's a supporting mod, and it depends on how bad your intake manifold is as to how much good it will do to port that intake manifold. With what, you know, we're talking about blueprinting, which is all you're really doing with that intake manifold. It's just taking out any casting flash or any intrusions or anything like that. HU saying the 5.7 leaves quite a bit on the table. Absolutely it does. 309 limited slip, 392 intake. The thing about the 392 intake is that if you are so inclined to run the 392 intake, definitely get a the Taser makes or made a controller that will allow you to run the short runner valve. There's some things that you've got to do to the car to make it work, but it's definitely worth it. Let it make the switch at 4,700 RPM, and you'll pick up some torque down low for sure, and it'll allow it to breathe a little bit better on the big end. It's worth it in terms of making power, but just keep this in mind. It's not an inexpensive proposition to get into. Max in saying, howdy, just joined the Mopar class. Salute. Hello, my friend. Miggy's asking about heads, cam, nitrous build. How important are the choice on heads, or are ported stock heads? Will they suffice? Custom grind cam and a $150 shot. So basically the stock heads are really good. I mean, you got to remember that these heads, whether they're a 5.7 or a 6.4 or a Hellcat for that matter, they all flow 320, 330 CFM from the factory. So it's not like you're coming into this with a set of heads that aren't any good. Those heads are actually really good from the factory. So porting them, I don't know that's going to do a whole lot of good. If you're going to go with an intake manifold like the Holly and you're looking to make real decent power with these things, then yeah, ported heads will work, because with the between the ported heads and the intake manifold, you can actually allow the car to breathe better on the big end, which will help you make power with the nitrous through the mid-range up through the big end, which is, whenever you build a nitrous engine, you always overbuild the airflow requirements into the equation, because nitrous takes up space. And so that's just part of how you put one of these together. Some guys say, you know, if you want to properly optimize it, you just build it like you're trying to overbuild your normal NA builds, and that usually works just fine. That's evident too when you run nitrous. If you notice the RPM peaks drop, or you will notice the RPM peaks will normally drop, and that's because nitrous takes up space. So that's why we do what we do. Some are saying like, subscribe, share. Stormy35 saying, hello everyone, how's your night? Going good. Booze is in saying, what's going on, B? Quick question for you. I was planning on dropping Eagle heads on my pre-Eagle block plus SRV intake, but I'm unsure of compression because I don't know the exact dome on the pistons. If I remember correctly, I think that combination yields 12.5 to 1, but it's been a while since I've even looked into that swap. But I want to say, God, man, I want to say it bumps compression. Well, I know that the 5.7 heads on a 392 bump it. I would check into that. I haven't really messed with that swap. And really, so let me ask, why would you want to drop Eagle heads on a pre-Eagle block? Just, and this is why I'm asking this. And it's not a criticism at all. I like the Apache heads. And one of the reasons why I like the Apache heads is because they have a more usable airflow profile. And what I mean by that is it's more traditional. So if, let's say you were to put 6.1 heads on that car, or even the 5.7s, it doesn't really matter. They all flow really well. A set of ported 5.7 heads will flow around 270 CFM. And although that's not as big of a number as the Eagle heads, it's still a lot of CFM, and it allows you a little bit more leeway with the camshaft. You can be a little bit more ham-fisted with it and play with it a little bit more. And that's another reason why I like the 6.1 so much, is that, yeah, no, that the heads on the 6.1 flow really close to what the 5.7 Eagle heads flow. But you can get those 5.7 heads to flow really well. I just don't want to see you spend money and be expecting an outcome that you might not find with that. And really, the main thing is just making sure you get the valve seats replaced in those Apache heads, no matter what you're up to. So hopefully that helps you. So that's the route that I would go if it were mine. And that way you wouldn't have to worry about compression ratios or anything like that. You can just play with airflow. You're still playing with over 10-to-1, so you would be good. Cam say, I've heard 9.3 cc or 11.8 cc for the pre-Eagles and 4 or 5 on the Eagles. Saying I also might just swap Eagle pistons in the pre-Eagle block at the same time. That's an ambitious build, brother. I mean, I get where you're going with that, but I would probably, just from a convenience and a power perspective, not knowing what your final goal is. If your final goal is outright power, that's one thing. But if you're looking to build a really fun hot rod on the street, that's a different route that I would probably take. Stormy statement out hanging out with Captain. Also up here in Canada, we have 91 most commonly. What would you recommend compression ratios? Aim to keep it around 11, but need to know the piston domes. So for me on 91, see, here's the thing. 11 would be the most that I would want to mess with. For your combination. I would probably want to hover more around 10 to 10.5 to 1, just because it gives you a little bit more knock threshold, and I just don't know what kind of fuel quality you're going to be bumping into. So I just keep that in mind when you're putting the combination together, that, again, I mean, a half a point's only going to cost you about 1.5% in terms of power output. If it's something fun, you're just playing with it, weekend cruiser, things like that, that half a point of compression or even a point of compression, you'd never notice the difference. And again, you just get a little bit more of that that cushion for knock your knock threshold. Won't be as sensitive. Well said. Hey, Professor B, planning on doing either a stage 2 or 3 TSP cam on my 2013 Challenger RT 6-speed. Currently a bore lift full catback. Question, will shorty headers be enough? Living in California. Not for a 3 at all. It would actually do you more harm than good. And you can't do long tubes because they'll be visually getting popped. Saying, so it'll be shorties, catback cam, and a good tune, get me over 400 rear wheel horsepower. I'll put it to you like this. So your car, depending on the dyno that you're on, if it's a dyno jet, the car that you have, well, let's run this back on Mustang dyno numbers. So Your car right now put down about 320 to 330 rear wheel horsepower on a Mustang dyno. The cam and everything else, the cam with long tubes, with a maybe or maybe not a cleaned up intake, is going to pick up about 45 to 50 horsepower, right? So you're looking at 380 on a Mustang dyno for a really clean, really good, well put together car. Most of them end up around 365-ish, but let's say it's just really well sorted and it puts down 380. That would absolutely be over 400 on a dyno jet. So if you're comparing it to a dyno jet, you'll be in good shape with that. And shorties on a stage 2 wouldn't be that bad. I just would not go in an aggressive stage 2. Again, keep it around that 230 on the exhaust, 220 on the intake range. Slash is saying that the long tubes from Cooks won't work on his 5.7 with all-wheel drive. Yeah, there's some stuff underneath there that get in the way, so I would take a look at maybe Stainless Works might have one that'll work for you. Jason, ever tinker with the Jet Performance Chip Stage 2 module? That would have been Binary Editor. Well, I'm thinking about the really old stuff, but no, nothing from Jet lately. Mark's saying, "Sup, Mason? Would have got a Holley high ram for the RT, but I was told it wasn't all that good, and I'd have to cut my head." Yeah, don't mess with that if you've got a stock car. That's not going to do you any favors. Mig's asking, heard mixed reviews on Holley intakes. What's the one to go for and how to set it up for the best and effective? Best and effective depends on what you're putting together, man. So if you want to put together something that just breeze like crazy, you're going to spin at ultra high RPM, the Holley works great. You just have to realize that that is a race intake. It's something that's going to want to spin to 73, 7,400 RPM. And on an RT, it's going to even want to probably tickle 75, 76. So have a cam that'll match up with that. Push rod springs are going to have to come into play at that point. Obviously, if it's an automatic, you're looking at some significant transmission tuning, and torque converter is going to be absolutely what you're going to need to go with that. So, what works best? Tight lobe separation angles with intake center lines around 109 will work well with that intake, at least on the street. If you really want to make it rip hard on the top end, then that would be more like a profile that looks more like it just depends on what you're putting together. It also depends on, what compression ratio you're running. Again, that intake manifold, the problem with that is that a lot of guys give it a bad rap, but the issue is that they're not building the right engine, and if you're not building the right engine, it's pretty easy to say, that intake sucks. Well, yeah, because it was never designed to do what you're asking it to do in essence. That intake manifold is designed to spin really high RPM or have big cubic inches behind it. I'll put it to you like this. Plenty of guys running in the 9s naturally aspirated with those intakes. So, but they're also building engines that are designed to work around and work with that intake manifold. Makes a big difference. Makes a real big difference. It's saying, good evening, sir. Oh, Kevin's saying, I've already got a set of the Eagle heads and on another Eagle truck motor. Nice. The engine will be going into a Challenger with a V6. Still around 3,500 if I remember correctly, and solid axle Ford 88. That'll be a fun car, dude. I'm kind of jealous, dude. That's awesome. Miggy's asking, any way to reach you outside of YouTube? Would really like to get advice, guidance on the build. Not really. I typically only do things through YouTube now. I don't really do stuff through Instagram or anything off the web or a website or anything like that. And that's primarily because, I'm not running a shop for the general public. I do help some shops out, camshaft design, things like that. But for GP, this is how I try to help you guys out and try to steer you guys in the right direction. If I were to open a shop, that'd be a different story. But, a shop, in other words, where I'm, helping guys, like a normal shop would, be involved with builds and things like that. I used to work for Alex Pites at Pites Performance. Anything that you would need Mopar related, I would go through Alex. He's the one guy that I trust, and he's a friend of mine. Y'all know that, but it's a situation where he's the guy that teaches guys how to tune these things. He's got a great staff over there, so anything Mopar related, I'd definitely go that route. And like I say, I'm more than happy to answer questions for you, give advice. A lot of times with Mopars with anything in life really, but with Mopars especially, it's knowing what not to do that is more important than knowing what to do. Mopars have a much more narrow tolerance, if you will, for big camshafts and all these other things, because you're dealing with the realities of the combinations that you've got. They're heavy cars. They need a lot of torque to get moving. So what ends up happening is that guys with the NA combinations, they end up with cars that are lazy or they feel lazy. And it's a shame because, the Hemi's it's an air pump just like every other engine is. And it's tough when you get guys that spend all this money and they end up getting kind of frustrated with the Mopars and move on, when in reality, if they just, again, stuck with the recipe and, kept the cam small, keep the stock converter, keep the stock intake manifold, long tube headers, just fine. Keep that, rock that. Metal substrate catalytic converters, if you go that route, though, do not try to use those small ceramic catalytic converters. They actually flow worse than the stock catalytic converters, which, by the way, are absolutely no hindrance to performance. And we've proven that over and over and over again. Cat Boo say, I'm thinking cam in the 224, 234 on a 112 and a half-ish. That's a pretty little cam. You're going to like that cam. That is actually extremely similar to, what the hell is the name of that one? That's real similar to the cam that we used when I spec'd the cam. There was a 69 Roadrunner with a 392 swap. And the cam that you just were showing of 224, 234 is very similar to the cam that I spec'd for that car. And mine was on a 113. So yeah, that you're definitely looking at a fun cam there. But remember, you don't really have to go much bigger than 224. 226 is for the street about as big as I would go. Now, if you're talking, you want to look at like a 426 or a 454 or 440, those end up in like the mid 230s range typically. And, keeping that LSA pretty tight at about 113. And really what's funny is that you can go significantly tighter than that. That 112 is about the range with that duration at 224, the 112-ish range, still fairly easy to tune. Nice snappy mid-range. Sounds really good too. You're going to like it. You're going to like it a lot. Jay saying I have the ATI 15% underdrive harmonic balancer ported. Intake manifold and throttle body, AFEC AI, jet chip, stage 2 module, E85 flex fuel kit, American Racing shorty headers with AW touring with resonators, all on the stock tune. I would love to see a data log of that car. I really would. Well, jet chip stage 2 module, I would say that's not really a stock tune. It's a module that's piggybacking on that stage 2 or on the factory ECU. But again, without the stage 2 chip, I would love to see a data log on that car. We'd have guys come in with long tubes and everything else. I'd data log the car. I was the guy that data logged the car before we would do anything with it. I would load test it. And there was so much knock sensor freak outage going on in there. It was hysterical. But I need to look into that jet deal. I tune with HP tuners, so we don't really use any modules. Okay, nag 1 trans. Also, car will be pretty much gutted, guessing 3,500 pound range. Man, if that's the case, I might go a little bit tighter with the LSA. I might go like at a 111 and a half. that would work out pretty well now that I'm thinking about it. Make it real snappy through the mid-range. Jason, would you say I'm living dangerously? No. I mean, if it works, it works. HU's asking, is there a flex fuel tune that is any good for an NA Mopar? I know some people go the E85 route when boosted. Mopar owners go the 93 or E85 and don't interchange amongst fuels. Guys, I got to tell you, we tried. So is there, let me see if I have a, do I have an E85 chart in here? It's been a while since I've even looked at this. There's some me tuning Foxy. That was fun. I don't think I do. Not in this one. So here's the thing. E85 with these cars, there are some reasons why these cars don't really pick up that much with the E85. So E85 as a fuel is fantastic. That you can get away with a lot of things. I've actually had a car on the dyno and done power sweeps with it, both stock cam and with a small cam, and have parked the car on the dyno. Again, quick brakes car. And we tried everything we could do to pick up horsepower with it. We can pick up a little bit of torque. And the reason why you can pick up a little bit of torque is that you don't have the same problem picking up torque that you do with horsepower, which is just the fact that you've got so much fuel mass going into the cylinder at any given time, into the intake port, I should say, really more to the point, at any given time. And so that extra whole lots of fuel displaces air. And you might say, okay, well, what about Mustangs? Mustangs are naturally aspirated and they run great on the 85. Yes, they do. They have a dual mode fuel system, both port and direct injected. And that makes all the difference in the world. When you can work with a direct injected engine, you're not displacing air necessarily from that intake charge. So there's that, at least that's the theory behind it. It's just one of those things where we tried everything we could to get power out of E85. Again, you pick up torque because, again, you can take advantage of the benefits of E85 through the torque curve. You can just keep throwing timing at it until it quits making torque, and it gets a pretty decent bump. Usually about 10 to 12 foot-pounds over 93 octane, but you lose all of those gains once you get the thing out to about 100 RPM. Everything goes, it's the exact same as gasoline. And so what I did is I had the car on the dyno and was just throwing timing at it. Like, well, does it like 20 degrees? Does it like 22 degrees? Does it like 24 degrees? And no matter what I threw at this car, and this is a car with long tube headers, it's very solid tuned car, I just could not get anywhere with it. And so it was kind of frustrating that we couldn't get any more power out of the 85. So yes, it technically made more average power with the 85, but the reality is that in terms of actual outright horsepower, it was identical to 93 octane. So I'm saying like, share, subscribe. Cal's asking, besides rods and pistons, is a 6.1 stock bottom end forged? Yes, it is. Cal's asking, I haven't heard too much on the Torque Storm. Does it work on the Hellcat? If you put a Torque Storm on a Hellcat, it would create a compound boost scenario, and you'd be better off just spooling up your stock supercharger more. The Torque Storm, though, it's not a bad supercharger. It's that sounded healthy. You're not going to pick up big, huge, ginormous numbers with it, but you can definitely pick up some power on a car that was otherwise naturally aspirated. The Cat Boo say, yes, the 6.1 crank is forged. Absolutely it is. Complex Vision is in. What's up, man? Jamie say, what up, B? We in tonight? I like it. Mickey saying, I agree with building to make everything work together. Currently on the hunt for what to put together build-wise, so it's best optimized. Plan is full bolt-on heads cam nitrous street car. Full bolt-on heads cam nitrous, super easy. Heads, don't really have to do anything with them. Cam, you're going to be getting new springs anyway. 080 push rod, stanky tie bars and collars. And then nitrous works, makes a really good controller. Cam somewhere in like the 226, 232, 234, kind of like the cam that was just talked about earlier. Those are going to be the ones that are those can be the combinations that are going to work the best for you. If you really want to start throwing it, that's again for a 392. If you're looking for like a good combination for the 5.7, actually that 220, 230 works really nice on the squeeze. Hit me, Dad. Thank you very much. Saying, hey, you've been away for a bit. Good to see you're still going strong. Any special consideration for manual NA card? Man, all the same applies, except you don't have to worry about the pesky torque converter thing. You can go a little bit more aggressive with the camshaft if you like. You've got the most aggressive gear out of the group. So, you know, I would say, again, all the same advice applies. But again, it just depends on how aggressive you want to go. And, you know, a lot of guys with the NA stuff, they'll just go pedal commander, clutch line mod, and a tune. And that's really it. That kind of rounds out what they're up to. Maybe long tube headers, but really long tube headers help manual cars a little bit more. It just gives them better drivability, in my opinion anyway. I've always liked the long tube header combination with the 6-speed cars. So, but again, just make sure you get the metal substrate catalytic converters. Don't try to go cheap and get the ceramic. They're not going to flow as well as you would need them to flow. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Make sure I'm not missing anybody here. Oh. Oh, Sovereign's on the phone with the folks. Got surgery coming up, man. Good luck with that, my man. You'll get through it. You'll be good, man. Mickey saying, sadly, lots of misguidance in the Mopar community. More than you know. It's one of the reasons why I do this show twice a week, buddy. There's a lot of folks getting really bad information. A lot of guys, it's more they think they know something. They may know something that worked back in the day, or they may be thinking about the combination from more of an LS-centric point of view. That'll work with the Hemis. It just doesn't. The cylinder heads flow air in a different way. No. And I'm not saying the Hemi's better. It's just different. Let's see. Southern Indiana saying, you've been talking gear some lately. How do you feel about a 390 swap for my 1320 for the 8th mile? Man, you know, I would say I would probably look at the 370s before I looked at the 390s. The 390s can be real aggressive, but that being said, I wouldn't have a problem with the 390s, especially since you're 8th mile racing, but I would probably say that you could end up potentially needing a tune more quickly, especially in colder air where the car's accelerating harder with that 390 gear. Now, remember that all the truck guys have 392 gears that are really quick. At least most of them do, are running 390 gears, and they all run the same tire that you would be running if you're going to be running, you know, a drag pack wheel and tire setup like I've got back there, which would be the 28 1050s. So it'd be the same gearing that you have with your car. That if there is a difference, the trucks can actually typically come in a little bit lighter because the guys just remove everything that's not like literally needed. It's one of the benefits of having a body on frame connection or a contraption. Everything that has any physical connection to that thing you can just remove with simple hand tools. But anyway, it's a good combination in that respect. Again, the only issue at that point though is they do get a little bit buzzy on the highway. So just know that coming into it. If you're specifically going for a quarter mile hit though, the 390 gears can work out well. But again, a tune could be in your future because of a fuel yip situation. Oh, Cap saying, all right, probably go with the Eagle piston and Eagle heads. That's, yeah, with the SRV intake. Stock Eagle is rated at 10.5 compression, so that should keep it right about there. Yeah, that will keep you right where you need to be. It'd be a fun combination too. So I'm saying I might have missed your response on what does it take to get a Scat Pack into the 500 horsepower range. Again, if you're talking about dyno, long tube headers, fairly not that big of a camshaft. Camshaft, obviously, pistons are not needed. You can use factory pistons, but you will need you'll need spring valve springs, 080 push rods, maybe a ported throttle body, maybe a cleaned up intake will basically lock you in on that number, but it just depends on the dyno. See, that's the other thing. Dynojet dynos can be rather generous. And so, yeah, that combination will definitely get you 500 horsepower to the rear wheels on some dynos. On others, though, they could be a bit stingy. So, but it's generally accepted. Just if we're talking about the normal parlance of Mopar rear wheel horsepower, any of the stage 2 camshafts that you may run across with all the necessary tchotchkes to make it work, long tube headers and ported intake and larger throttle body are just bonuses at this point. If you've got a Hellcat air box with a Hellcat air filter or K&N air filter, no air filter, or some kind of open element on a dyno, it's generally understood and accepted that will make 500 horsepower ish to the rear wheels. We could be talking about 490, you could be talking about 510. Again, it just depends on the dyno, but you're going to be somewhere in that general vicinity. Oh, Cap saying I'll have to see how much I can tighten up the lobe set with the Eagle heads and piston. I wouldn't probably go much tighter than about a 111.5. 112 for sure. It would work. 112.5 would be a really good cam. One of the issues on the exhaust side. So the main thing is just, be careful with how far back you're going to rock that camshaft. Don't retard it too much. About the most I'd retard that cam would be probably 109 degrees. So let's say you want to go with, in other words, if you're going with a 112, I would go at least 3 degrees advanced with it. Do not install that 112 straight up because you're going to be potentially bouncing that exhaust valve off of a piston. Oh, Summer Night saying crank horsepower? Oh, they're already there. 392 is already basically at 500 horsepower, practically to the crank. Kevin saying blueprint and intake, good tune, yeah. Summer said no heavy mods now. I just went over that combination there. Summer saying stock is what, 430 at the wheel? Again, depends on the dyno, but you're looking at 430 on a dyno jet. Again, you just saw my old chart, 410 on that Mustang dyno. And again, thank you, Hemi Dad. I appreciate it. Oh, Hemi Dad saying he got his brother a pedal commander for his 570. He loves it. I like them, dude. They're a lot of fun. Roy saying, what up, peoples and Mr. B? Can't stay late. What's up, Roy? You guys got y'all hanging out. Miggy's asking about full bolt-on heads cam nitrous build. Would you recommend E85? E85 works great with nitrous. So the only thing though, again, see here, this is, for me, I like 93 octane, and with my standalone, because I would always run a standalone fuel system for nitrous. I wouldn't run E85 in it because E85, when you leave it alone for long periods of time, can really eat everything up. Just get you a can of race gas and put it in there. That would be my suggestion. So I'd go 93 octane with race gas in your standalone fuel cell. That is the direction I would go. And if you're going to go with one of the nitrous outlet, I think it was nitrous outlet, right? Nitrous outlet kits. that are going to be enriching the mixture through the injectors with based on injector duty cycle. And that's how it arms and disarms too, or fires, I should say, and turns off the nitrous. You can go that route too. Again, E85, remember how much fuel you're going to be introducing and how that distributes. It's just, I get worried about E85 with distribution, especially if you're doing a throttle body style sprayer. So again, it just also depends on how you're introducing the fuel. So there's different ways to go about it, but if you're using more of a more traditional style, I would probably just go with the standalone fuel system and go with race gas in that standalone. Being saying 6.4, of course, yeah. I mean, again, you can make E85 work though. E85 actually makes life kind of nice tuning on nitrous. Right, I'm saying banging gears with the pedal commander, long tubes and flex fuel, love it. I like it. Damien's saying never two cars are the same. That is correct. Damien's liking the combo for Red Dog, absolutely. Cal's saying I see a lot of confusing videos on cams. Is there one out that explains it Barney style? Man, the problem with camshafts is that it's all kind of a dark art, right? But when it comes to the Mopars, if you stick to the recipe of like that 220, 230-ish cam, all the cars that I know of that have gone with that combination have done really well, been very drivable, and it just kind of makes sense. Where you run into problems is there's a lot of camshaft theory that's out there. David Vizard is one guy that, I mean, you just hear over and over and over again. A lot of his stuff is all race cam, though. It's all carbureted race stuff, and I'm going to argue that it's not really applicable to things that we would actually pay attention to on our end. If you're building something that is just absolutely a straight up race combo, though, there are some things that you can take from some of his teachings that'll work, that actually do work. But I can tell you, I didn't employ any of those when I put Demonology's cam together. So, but again, it's a completely different combination than what his NA protocol would be. A lot of what his NA protocol would look like work great for carburetors, but are just almost practically untunable when you've got cylinder heads. So when you're working with like a tumble port cylinder head configuration, like what we've got with these things. We're done saying thank you. We're saying 500 sounds like a good number for a 6.4. It's a real good number. That's a low 11, high 10-second car. I'm saying funny that the 6.4 makes 85 more horsepower than the Gen 1 Viper. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Roy's saying, I'm happy with 45 horsepower. Just have to beat you off the line. They do rip, that's for sure. So I'm saying 43 watchers, only 23 likes. Hit the like, subscribe. And if you're new to the show, consider subscribing. It helps out, helps the channel a ton, especially with that old YouTube algorithms. Charger's asking 5.7 liter, 392 cam, 392 intake manifold, shorty headers, 3-inch mid pipes with high flow cats, 85 millimeter throttle body, fair combination for the street. Kinda. Look, I like the 392 cam in the 392 because it does good 392 things. The thing that I don't like about the 392 cam in the 5.7 is the lobe sep is just way too wide. You're actually, I don't want to say it's a downgrade, all right, because it does have more duration. So I'm not going to say it's a downgrade from the 5.7 cam, but if you're going to be putting a cam in the car, put an aftermarket cam in the car with more duration under the curve than what you're working with that stock 392 cam. Again, it's not a bad combination. They make good power, but there's definitely a lot of power left on the table, especially since you're going to be paying for the labor or doing the work anyway. The 85 millimeter throttle body, not really needed in that application though. You can save your money on that. For sure. Donnie's asking, do you know of any plug-and-play 85 compatible fuel pumps for the 15 plus 5.7s? Most guys I guess, will the 392 pumps just bolt right in? I know a lot of guys just go with the 5.7 pumps. And that's another reason why I'm not a big fan of E85. It just eats everything alive, especially if you're not driving it often. Cambu saying, what's up, Donnie SRT? Asking Donnie about what he's running with that Camshaft 257. Me saying spray for nitrous would be the manifold plates. Very good. Yes, thank you for that. That is money that will save you a ton of headaches. Oh, Donnie's spooling his stage 3 to 63, which is about right. John's asking about weight transfer and wheels and tires. The thing is that if you put stock, all seasons on a Demon, it doesn't really ride any differently. Actually, the Demon's kind of funny because it has softer suspension, so it actually rides kind of plush when you compare that to the Red Eyes. Red Dog, thank you very much. Saying thank you for the previous advice on long tubes. Loving it. Just need that H-pipe now. Yeah, love me some H-pipes, dude. I'd done so much testing with that combination or those setups back in the day. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate the support. Rotest TV, curious to hear about your thoughts on the MDS and camshaft lifter wear. There's quite a few things that contribute to that. And GMs have the same problem, by the way, guys. It's not limited to Dodge only. Pretty much anything with MDS can have this particular issue. There are a couple of things that lead to the issues with the camshafts. One is heat treatment of the cam itself. There was some talk that some of the camshafts that had failed had bad heat treatment. So it's okay, a bad batch of cams. Others will talk about the lifters themselves being failure points. There was a change. Magneti Morelli did make a change, a running line change to the lifters. What was it for the MDS lifters in 2015-16? I want to say it was maybe 2016. Anyway, they've got different needle bearings in them. There was some thought that maybe that was causing some of the failures. And then of course you got the guys that have said it's an oiling thing and all of that. All I can say is this: most of the failures had been coming from cars that were allowed to idle for extended periods of time over multiple days. And this goes for the GM and for the Dodge products. Okay, so the GMs and the Dodge share the same type of technology, and to be honest with you, it's more than likely an oil changing issue more than anything else. Let me give you an example, okay, guys. In the fleet, we have 20. I'm going to say 22, might be 26 Ram 1500s. Okay, 22. Let's call it 22 because I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head right now. All of them have Hemis, except some of the later batches, which are the V6 trucks. We have had 0 engine failures, 0 camshaft failures, 0 lifter failures. And all of these trucks, none of them sit idle. They all run primarily highway miles, or at least city traffic miles. And now we've had transmission failures, but no engine failures. Hemi ticks, yeah, all of them practically. But the mileage on these trucks, the last one that went to auction had 323,000 miles on it. And the only things that were replaced on it was a steering wheel clock spring, a body control module, and tires. And he may have done ball joints on that truck. Anyway, whole bunch of miles on that truck. A lot of 200 plus thousand miles. Buffy's got 176,000 miles. Just ran a 1450, by the way. I mean, the truck runs great. All of these trucks run great. They're fun to drive. They're quick. They're zippy trucks. And I really, really like them for that. So why have we had no failures like that? You know, the Hemi-Tic is something that's completely different, not even worth talking about, really, for purposes of what we're talking about. It's because all the guys get the oil changed all the time in these trucks. I mean, these trucks all have the oil changed at 5,000 to 7,000 miles every single time. So it's really more of a maintenance thing than anything else. All of these guys drive the trucks, though, like they're stolen. I mean, everybody that has one of these Ram trucks, they spend more time at wide open throttle than you might think. And I mean, the trucks just get beaten on mercilessly, and they keep running great. With about the main thing that's a pain in the ass is that they go through brakes quickly, and none of them have limited slip rear diffs. So they fry up the right rear tires. But aside from that, again, it's all about maintenance, really, is what I'm seeing. And remember, it's not mileage, it's engine hours. And again, if you're letting a vehicle sit idle for extended periods of time, you're putting miles on it. It's just the wheels aren't turning. And so, if you consider that for every hour that the vehicle idles, it's the same as it going, say, 30 miles, 40 miles. If you think of it in that respect, you can see how those miles can add up quite a bit, especially if the vehicle's left idling for any real length of time. But that doesn't matter. All of our guys rip these trucks, and I can tell you that's the main thing, is that if you drive it hard and you drive it a lot, maintain the hell out of it, and it'll take good care of you. I mean, remember, Buffy just had a water pump put on her at 174 whatever thousand miles, and that's it. That's the only. Oh shit! That reminds me, I gotta get a belt for the truck. So yeah, I got to fact that. In fact, I need to write that down because I will forget that, and I have got to go to the dealership tomorrow. So belt for Buffy. Really like that truck a lot. Be a sad day when I go let that one go. But hopefully that answers a question, or at least gives you an idea for what you can expect if you maintain the trucks. And again, this is coming from somebody that has a direct line of sight to about 20 of these that are fleet trucks. So John's asking, will the new Demon beat the old Demon by a lot at the drag strip? Oh yeah, it's not even close. Like it's if you were to see them on the drag strip, next to each other going down the track, it's the difference between a car that runs, say, a 920, which is a realistic number for the 170. Let's say it runs a 920 and the Demon runs a 980, 990. That's about 9 car lengths actually at those speeds. They won't even be in the same frame if you're videotaping the cars. They won't. You'll have to pan way out to see the Demon that's chasing that 170. Sorry, I don't be bad. It is bad. Mickey's asking, sweet spot on the throttle body sizing with 392 paired with ported manifold, 84 millimeter. Give Fastman a shout. He will get you hooked up. Tell him I sent you too. Good dude. John's asking, is it easy to put Freon in a Challenger? I think you're at just refrigerant. Yeah, it's the same as any other car. Cat Booze, yeah, Miggy, stock throttle body can support more than enough. Matter of fact, depending on who does the work on your intake manifold, I probably wouldn't even bother putting a throttle body on there, mainly because the way that a 392 intake manifold kind of routes and goes around, you end up not really being able to flow much more than that 80 anyway. I'll give you an, okay, so again, with all the data logging that I've got, what you really need to do with one of these manifolds, and I never did this, is you need to cut the lid off of it and really get in there and port the whole runner through. And even then, I don't know that your KPA, which is the inches of mercury that you would be pulling with that engine at wide open throttle, I don't know that you would get much better. So to give you an idea, the best KPA I was ever able to pull out of one of those manifolds was 98 with a baro of 100. And to give you an idea, that's like pulling half an inch of mercury, give or take. So in essence, I was sitting at about as good as you could hope for a cammed 392 with that intake manifold. And that was a hogged out intake manifold, backfilled the whole bit with epoxy, and had an 84 millimeter Fastman throttle body. So considering that, that was about the best data that I saw out of that car. It's tough to get much better than that. Most manifolds, if you're doing well, the 5.7 is actually a really good combination when you look at the data. And I can tell you that Stormy will drag like 96 kPa on a 100 baro. And that is to say it's like an inch of vacuum. So if you're into carburetors, it's about what you would want underneath a 4-barrel carburetor for proper atomization and fuel distribution, the charge cooling and all of that. That's about where you would want to be. It's not quite race level, but it's definitely very high performance street at that point. So hopefully that helps you. Roy, thank you very much. Say, Mr. B, I bought aftermarket headlights and sometimes at night they flicker. Do you think I should buy factory ones to fix the problem? Yeah, the factory ones are actually pretty solid. Unfortunately, sometimes those aftermarket headlights can have bad ballasts in them, and that's what kicks off the light. It's just like lights in the office. So it might be a good idea if you're getting a lot of flicker out of them. Check your wiring, make sure everything's looking good there. But again, a lot of times, matter of fact, with Revlon, I've got one of my LEDs that flickers, and I just need to get a new LED. It's just a bad LED ballast that's in there. And again, that can cause it to flicker. Sometimes it flickers, sometimes it doesn't. Somebody's going out to have a good time. That sounded good. But yeah, that's something that you can run into with the aftermarket stuff, unfortunately. And the factory stuff's expensive. So I'm saying, yeah, it sounds like the LEDs are failing. Yeah. Missy's asking about, Miggy is asking about the throttle body for the Holly intake. I'd go with a Hellcat throttle body. I'd go with a 92 on something like that. But again, remember that that's going to take a lot of tuning to keep the thing from surging and doing a bunch of weird stuff. But the Hellcat throttle body for the power level that you're going to be at is going to be right there. That 90 millimeter will support on the NA side easily 635-ish horsepower at the crank. So you'll be in good shape with that. That is the direction I would go. Sovereign and Damien, do your maintenance. Yes. Makes all the difference in the world. Oh, Max, yeah. Hemis do like to be spun. They like to be run, man. Oh, Sovereign's hanging out with Roy. Let's see. John said it would be a major step if I went from my V6 to a Scotty. Yes, it would be. Oh, voltage regulated module. Oh, what did I say? Ballast? Yeah, it's the same idea though. Yeah, and it's funny because I've got to get, I do need to get new LEDs for my car. Chrome's asking any real benefits to a higher stall converter on a 6.4 1320? Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, it'll at least, if you can, yeah, it'll allow you to hammer the rear tires a little bit harder on the launch. If you're running a drag pack wheel and tire setup, just basically do what the truck guys do and put like a 4,200 RPM stall back there. Thing is, you got to be able to make it hook though. And that's where some things can get a little bit dicey. There's some guys that are out there running low 11s with the stock torque converter. It just depends on how hard you want to go with that. Circle D does have some, or have a new converter. Most Performance sells the one that the guys with the trucks like, and it works really well. Mickey's asking, the spark plug for nitrous, one step colder, correct? Yes. NGK 7s. NGK, I can't remember the part number off the top of my head. Same one you'd use for the Hellcat that will work for that. I'm amazed how much power NA applications can make. They can make a bunch of power, buddy. You're right. It'll freak you out how much power they can make. Red Dog saying, I have 315s on the rear, way too wide for lowered car. Was going to 305s. What are your thoughts? Man, it depends on the wheel size that you're working with. If you're rocking 11s, 305 is what I would probably go with. If you're rocking 305s, I would go with if you're rocking 10.5s, go with the 295 40s. That would be my suggestion. And to be honest with you, man, it depends on the 305 too, because there are some 305s that are basically like small 315s, like the Nitto Tri-5s are. Roy's hanging out with Sovereign. Donnie's saying he got the Circle D 3400 and it's not loose enough. Yeah, I can see that being the case. Like I say, the 42 seems to be where most guys are headed. Red Dogs, you got the 10.5s. Depending on what your front tires are, I'd probably go the 295 40 route. That's what I went with my car, and I love the way that it looks. They don't bulge, but it's up to you. 10.5s, I ran 305s. If you can get away with 305 35s and you're running like a 275 40, then it'll be the same height, and you'll be in pretty good shape there. Oh shit, hang on just a second, guys. Let me turn this thing on. Hang on. Hang on, this thing's gonna be all loud. All right. You hear that? You go, back there. So I don't know if y'all can hear it or not. It's the compressor trying to kick on. I've got a very old compressor. Sit there, act like it's about to pop. And I really shouldn't complain too much because I did fish that out of the dump. Actually, no, that was sitting out in front of somebody's front yard, and I made it work, but I keep forgetting to turn it off. Thanks for saying, oh, love the 6.1. The 6.1's an awesome combination. I don't understand why the 6.1 doesn't get the love that it deserves. In fact, God, to this day, it's the only car. It's the car that I can't believe I didn't buy. Like it was one of those, what was I thinking moments. Black with silver stripe SRT8 Challenger. With lowered on CCW wheels was what, I mean, I don't even know how to put this. I mean, it's what turned me really back on and got me interested in Mopars again. Just the look of the thing. I ended up running across a couple of them, and there's actually one here in town. It's one of those cars where I can't, it would have seemed like such a natural fit as opposed to the 2016 SRT that I got. You'd have thought that I'd have gone with the older car. To this day, I kind of regret not being a little bit more aggressive in hunting one of those down, because I really like that car a lot. Oh, John's talking about the King Daytona, all of those jailbreak. Yeah, they're all just jailbreaks. They're all sticker packages. Oh, Chrome saying I have the stock 1320 converter and have done the 15-inch converter. Nice. Thing ought to hit hard. Jay says, have you done any research? Ruthenium spark plugs? Nah, I forgot also I have the MSD coil packs. I was curious if I should try them. Nah, stick with the stock stuff. Don't worry about the plugs thing. It does not make any difference. Oh, Red Dog, you got the 275 front. Check out my video on the factory replica Flowforms, the FF66, or the 66 FF wheels that I put on my car. I went with 295/40 Falcon Azenas FK 510 SUV, 295/40s in the rear, and I'm rocking the 275/40s up front. I love the way that it looks. The car handles amazingly well with those tires, and they look good. They have the same side profile. You know how you've got they don't bulge out. In other words, they have that nice gradual, good looking, stock looking type of a profile. It looks really good. And they don't bulge out. They don't stick out. And again, the Falcons hook just fine for an NA car. They'd be a lot of fun. Matter of fact, I would recommend them every day of the week. Oh, Sovereign's checking in with Roy on that YouTube deal. Red Dog saying, thanks. Absolutely. John's, are either front skinny tires the same? No, they're not. They're a completely different size. Oh, Chrome, a 15-inch conversion. Got you. Let's see. Mickey's asking, since the 392 comes so optimized from the factory, and from your knowledge, I'll be keeping stock heads for the build. Is this same case as long tube headers, or can that help as a supporting mod? It helps as a supporting mod. They build torque down low. They really don't make power up top until you put a cam in them, and then they do help. But again, with that 392 having such a wide lobe separation angle, you just don't get the horsepower production, although you do get a little bit of torque. And you also get some partial throttle torque. It's some things that you never see on the dyno, but the drivability with long tubes is noticeably different. I know that sounds weird, right? Like, oh, it's always a performance thing, but it's the subtle improvements that make the car kind of add a lot of richness and flavor to the car, and that does make a difference. Oh, X. Yeah, I'd say the numbers compared to the 6.4. I don't know what that means, bro. Maybe I missed something. Sovereign's asking, what Challenger design do I prefer? The earlier cars, like the first of the generation or the second? I prefer the second, but let me rephrase that. I don't have a preference, really, now that I'm thinking about it. I like the interiors of the second gen a little bit more, but I don't really hate the first gen either. I like, actually, I kind of like them both for different reasons. And I don't know, I guess I've got a soft spot for the first ones. That's the one I always kind of fell in love with. Got the headlights. Red Dog saying almost bought a 6.1 that is board and stroke to 426. Yep. Yeah, 2015 is the redesign. Yep. Sovereign's liking the 15s. Yep. Red Dog's long tubes. Yes. Cam and converter recommendations. again, it just depends on what you were planning to do with the car and then what you are eventually really going to do with the car. As far as what I would cam and convert it to. So I would say cam, I mean, everybody kind of defaults stage 2 and stock converter. The stock converter will flash to 3,000 RPM. Oh, Roy's hanging out with Sovereign. Let's see. He's liking the analog gauges. I kind of do too. Well, it's all still computerized, but it's nice. Boy, her name is Killer Bee. I like it. Oh, me saying, yeah, I agree. Real world drivability from performance upgrades, completely different conversation from dyno numbers. And that's the thing. Everybody loves to hang on the dyno numbers, but nobody wants to talk about the big cam cars driving like absolute dog shit. And that's part of the issue that I ran into. In fact, that's all the reason why when I was with Pikes, we started the Camshaft program. I had driven a customer's car that had a Comp 270 cam in it. And it was lackluster at best. It was just dead down low. It never felt like it made any power. And I knew for a fact that my stock combination SRT would walk all over it. And I was talking to Alex. I said, we gotta, this can't be, we can't be, if I didn't want to let the car leave the shop. So, but you know, it is what it is. That's what started a lot of that. And one thing kind of led to another. And next thing you know, we had a little camshaft package put together that happened to work really, really well. Johnny's saying, thanks for all the info. Thank you, my friend. Oh, DM saying, I heard the first gen cool better because of the heat extractors, but I love the look of the Gen 2. I mean, I love all of them, man. I'm not anybody to say that. I mean, I would love to get my hands on like a 2010 SRT8 Challenger. That'd be a lot of fun. And I would probably want one with the NAG 1 just because I like the NAG 1 shift protocol. But listen, guys, with that, I've actually got a little bit over. I was going to try to keep this one to about an hour or so. We got about an hour and a half. But guys, I got to wrap this up because I wake up crazy early. But guys, love each and every one of y'all. Thank y'all so very much for the support of the channel. It means a ton to me. Love each and every one of y'all. Would not do this without you. Guys, get out there and do something cool for somebody. Chances are they need it way more than you know. And with that, that is a wrap. Y'all have a great one. Take care.